Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Animas Corporation, providing insulin delivery products for people living with diabetes and part of the Johnson & Johnson Diabetes Care Companies. Hi, it's Stacy. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. I'm not a doctor. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
This week, an update on one of the many ongoing artificial pancreas projects, Type 0 Technologies. Growing out of years of research from the University of Virginia, they announced a new partnership this summer. And they say it's hard to overstate the emotional impact these devices are having.
As a research coordinator doing those studies, I had patients cry when they get the device back, and I understand it. I'm like, I get it. You had relief for a little while, you could sleep with peace of mind, and you could, or your child could sleep with peace of mind. I've had parents cry getting their, the device back, but, and I assure them that everything they've done will go towards the advancement of this, and it's not all for naught.
McElwee Malloy, who has type 1 herself, talks about the studies, the progress, and their agreement with Tandem. Plus, in this week's Community Connection, necessity is the mother of invention, right? Diabetes moms are nothing if not resourceful. My Community Connection today, the inventor of Diabetic Dabs, helping clean up after finger sticks.
Not only was it gross, because if you opened up the inside of his case, it was, a pool of dry blood, and of course my laundry was covered in little blood spots. But outside of that, I thought to myself, this cannot be a clean, safe way for him to be doing this. There's got to be an alternative solution.
Liz Sacco explains her product and her motivation. Her oldest son, she has 4 boys, was diagnosed in 2011. It all starts now on Diabetes Connections. Welcome to another episode of Diabetes Connections. I'm Stacy Sims. Really glad to have you along for another week. If you're new to the show, Diabetes Connections is all about educating and inspiring about type 1 through stories of connection, talking to amazing people in our community who have completed wonderful accomplishments or are involved very much in technology, love talking to all of the different companies about what's new and what's next. And also, it's about getting inspired by people living ordinary lives, if there is such a thing, with diabetes, because I think we all deserve medals for just getting through all this garbage day in and day out. It is not easy, and I'm so glad to share so many of these terrific stories with you. So thanks for coming along. I always like to ask you to do a couple of things if you're new to the show. Please go ahead and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're listening to. If you're listening online or on Facebook, that's great too. Just want to get you the information. But if you're using iTunes or the podcast app or iHeartRadio or anything like that, please go ahead and subscribe to the show. And I also ask that you subscribe to the newsletter as well. That way you will get all of the information every week. You won't miss an episode. And it's a really easy way to share with anybody else that you think might be interested in the show, because you get the email and then you can email it to your mom or your sister or your friend who's got a kid who's newly diagnosed, or whoever you think really could use something like this. So we are coming up on 10 years in the diabetes community. My son, who is almost 12, was diagnosed in December of 2006. And it's a pretty exciting time right now. Lots of technology advances, lots of clinical trials underway, some new FDA approvals, and lots to talk about, certainly. So I want to tell you all about what's happening with Type 0 coming up in just a moment. But first, I need to tell you about Animas. I love working with Animas. And while we've been with diabetes now, as I said, for 10 years, we've been using Animas pumps for 9 years. Benny went on a pump when he was 2.5. And I love my son's Animas insulin pump. I met a bunch of people recently at a JDRF event in Atlanta, and it was so great to hear why so many of you love the Animas experience as well. They offer a choice of insulin pumps, so you can choose the one that's right for you or for your child. And with kids, it is great that the Animas pumps really fit an active life. I love talking about our experience with Animas. They make it easy with great products and incredible customer service. Find out more about Animas. Just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Animas logo. Over the years, we have occasionally tried to get into clinical trials. Not too often. There aren't that many that happen in my area. We're near Charlotte, North Carolina. There are a few that have happened in what's called the Research Triangle area near Raleigh, at Duke University and at Chapel Hill at UNC out that way, but really not in our area and not very often at all for little kids. I did apply, I applied Benny to be part of the trials at the University of Virginia and didn't get in. So despite that, we're still very interested to find out what's been going on. And still hopeful that we'll get into one of these clinical trials somewhere down the road. But at the University of Virginia, they have been working on an artificial pancreas program and project for quite a few years. They have a Center for Diabetes Technology, and they have basically turned much of that into Type 0 Technologies. That is a startup company that is using a lot of the research and development from the University of Virginia to come up with an artificial pancreas. And this summer, Type 0 Technologies announced that they were going to be partnering with Tandem. Tandem will be the pump that they're using for right now. They actually have announced that it's a non-exclusive agreement in the long term and that their system could work with a multitude of pumps, which is pretty interesting. So we're going to talk a lot today about what their system is all about. And what's great about this interview, at least from my perspective, I always like to hear from people who have type 1 diabetes, who are either trying this out or part of the development. And McElwee Malloy is the head of patient engagement. She's the director of marketing as well at Type 0. She's had type 1 herself since 1998. She's participated in artificial pancreas trials, not this one at Type 0 as she works there, but she's got that perspective of being a person with diabetes, a patient in the clinical trials, a clinician as well. She is a diabetes educator. I was thrilled to talk to her about what Type 0 is all about. Molly, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking some time out to talk about this.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Well, there's so much to talk about, but let's start very basic if we could. What is Type 0 Technologies? You've been around for a while, but if you could just explain what the company is and does.
Sure. So Type 0 Technologies originated when our CEO, Chad Rogers, licensed some intellectual property from the University of Virginia. And that intellectual property was the algorithms associated with the artificial pancreas research and a couple other things, which we can talk about later, that are related to diabetes management. And so Type 0 was formed on the basis of this intellectual property or IP to progress diabetes management forward and to commercialize artificial pancreas, the research that came out of the University of Virginia, which is where I came from. So that's sort of where we started. We have since licensed our technology to as a non-exclusive agreement with Tandem Diabetes Care for implementation, and are in the progress right now of putting together some clinician-based tools for diabetes management.
So basically, one of the things you're doing at Type 0 is this closed-loop research, right? Trying to get an artificial pancreas system at the University of Virginia. And as a diabetes mom, I've heard about this on and off for years. I sent an email once when they were looking for people, for kids, I think were eligible at one point. But it hasn't been out there quite as much, at least in terms of the diabetes press, the media that I look at, as some of the other bigger projects that are coming up. Can you talk a little bit about the last couple of years of Type 0 and the closed loop? Because this is an artificial pancreas, right? This is a pump and a CGM that talk to each other.
Well, it's a platform that incorporates those two devices. So, it's interesting. There's not been a lot of press around it. And some of that's been, we've operated in stealth mode for a little while. And so we were ready to do a licensing deal. And And the University of Virginia is just not very good about singing their own praises. So there's two factors.
And let me interrupt you there.
Yeah.
I'm fine with anybody working on this in stealth mode for as long as it takes if you come out with something that works.
Yes.
That wasn't meant to be a criticism, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, absolutely. And so those two things kind of contribute to the fact that it looks like that we haven't been doing this for very long. But we have 10 years of clinical data, of clinical trials, and over, I believe it's 190,000 hours of use. So we're at a stage right now where, licensing to Tandem, we'll be able to move them into basically a trial to prepare them for a PMA or a pre-market approval to the FDA, which puts them in the position of doing a pivotal trial. So we're actually at a final stage in comparison to a lot of other research that tends to get more press. But, and we've gotten, over $25 million in clinical research done. So, we're pretty far down the road and in comparison to other people, but perhaps not enough, we've not done enough tooting of our own horn to do
that would, listen, it is a race between a lot of different companies, including Animas, who sponsors this podcast.
Sure.
I mean, there's no secret of that there. But I'm just curious, can you tell me what the system is? I mean, I know it's more of I assume it's more of the algorithm. Is it a CGM that we're familiar with? The pump now will be Tandem, right?
For right now, yes. Tandem has licensed the research, licensed the algorithm, and they're going to be implementing it. So yes, it will be Tandem. And again, that's a non-exclusive agreement, so it won't maybe always be Tandem, but for right now it will be Tandem. And we use a smartphone, an Android smartphone that's wiped basically as a device. So it's basically no longer a phone, it's a medical device. And we put our software on there, and our software is called In Control. And our app basically operates the insulin pump and gets the information from the Dexcom continuous glucose monitor. So we are exclusively working with Dexcom right now. And that information is translated into an app that is using algorithms to mitigate hyperglycemia, mitigate hypoglycemia, keep you in range, accommodate exercise, accommodate sleep. And basically, you interact with it for meals, but the desire is that, and it's hard to design something that no one interacts with, but the desire behind the design of this device is that you don't interact with it unless you need to, so that you just live your life. And I know myself with type 1 diabetes, that is something I long for. I would have a hobby. I would do other things. There's a lot I would accomplish if I weren't trying to constantly manage this disease.
And I want to talk more about that, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. So it's Dexcom CGM, insulin pump, which right now will be licensed to Tandem, yes, but maybe not forever. Algorithm that goes in the phone that's not a phone. And is it just to be clear, is it a first iteration that you think people would enter their mealtime insulin and then perhaps down the road not? Is that what I heard, or is that the whole thing?
So that in its current form, you are currently telling it how many carbs you're ingesting for a lunch, and you're confirming a meal bolus. And you at this time can decide, do I want to extend this up to 2 hours, or do I want to give it all right now? And do I agree with the bolus? So that's in the current iteration, you're having those 3 decision points being made. You can also, in its current iteration, decide to give an additional correction bolus at any time if you wish. Now those things may change as technology gets better. People often think, artificial pancreas is a cure. It's not a cure. It's a really smart computer program that will take care of your diabetes in the meantime when you're not watching. You still need to tell us what you're eating, but we hope eventually that it's smart enough to perhaps even help you bolus for the type of meal that you're giving. So that's, we hope that in the future it's able to do more than that, but that currently, sleep without worry, exercise without worry, live your life in the meantime. Tell us when you're eating.
Have you, as a person with type 1, have you been part of these trials? Have you tested it on yourself?
So interesting enough, my story with artificial pancreas and actually becoming a nurse and a diabetes educator begins with entering into an artificial pancreas trial in 2006. And I was a participant in this, was one of the very first trials. It was at UVA. It was sponsored by Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, JDRF. And it was an Omnipod, and it was a Navigator sensor. Those of you remember Abbott Navigator, rest in peace. I loved that thing. And it was a laptop computer. And so every so often, it might have been 5-10 minutes, a physician would look at the computer, get recommendations for basically a basal bolus, and give that bolus at that time manually for 24 to 48 hours. And that poor sleep deprived physician would be with you that entire time. Now, I could sleep through this, Omnipod, you don't have to touch me to do that. So that was, for me, that was enough insight for me to decide at that point in time I wanted to change what I was doing. And so I went back to school for nursing. I got my CDE, and I started to work for the Center for Diabetes Technology at the University of Virginia. And I asked them ahead of time, what do I need to do to get hired? And they're like, well, we could use another nurse. And I was like, fine, great, I'm in. Easy. I'll go back to school.
Wow, really?
Really? And granted, that's not as easily said.
Well, of course, that's what I mean. It's incredible.
but I was like, well, if that's all I have to do, well, sure, I'll do that. It was important to me at that time to make some significant changes in my life, to follow this, to be able to work on this research, and to now be able to be in a position to help commercialize this product is something I really believe in. I've spent 10 years of my life on this now. So I might be the biggest fan. I've definitely used it on myself in trials previous to becoming hired. Obviously, once you're hired, the research, you're not actually participating in the research. So and I've used our app with saline.
I need to interrupt you, Molly. You say obviously. I think many people listening, and I'll kind of put myself, even though I know better, but I was thinking, if I worked there, I'd be, I don't have diabetes, but I'd be grabbing my son, hey, it's take your kid to work day, and, slapping him on.
Right. Well,
it's interesting, though. It makes sense that you can't use it. I mean, I was getting a little carried away there.
No, and there may be people in other positions in other organizations that are deciding to, throw caution to the wind and do that. The reason I'm not doing that is I'm not going to jeopardize anything with the FDA and what they say we need to do. So I would never put the commercialization of this project above my own needs. So I am not, do I want to use it? Sure. There's another person here that works with us that has type 1, and would he like to use it? Sure. But we know better. Better. I've been trained as a research coordinator. I know the rules and regulations on off-label use. And if you're not currently enrolled in a clinical trial that's being monitored, you cannot be playing around with a device. So, and that's true of any device that needs FDA clearance before it comes to market. And I know not everybody follows those rules, but we do. And
I'm not here to imply that I have any knowledge of anybody not doing it. That was just my own ignorance of thinking, it'd be fun to play where you work, but I get it. I don't want to imply. I didn't imply that about anyone.
No.
But
and people often think that. They're like, "Where's your device?" And I'm like, "Well, I have something running on simulation here, or I have something hooked up to my sensor and a pump using saline, but I don't currently run the system on myself." For those reasons. But I do interact with the system all the time to test it. I certainly try to break things. I try to make sure that it works every way possible. I try to do idiotic things with it to make sure that we can accommodate any situation, because you never know what someone's going to do.
You got to give me a for instance now. What's an idiotic thing?
So let's talk about, and I'll talk about something I've done with the device to make sure I can do it. But, the reason there is a label on your hairdryer that says don't use it in the shower is because someone did that. So,
Right.
there's, there are crazy things that people will try. So I've tried, will it work if I walk, a mile away from my receiver? No. Will it work if I walk away from my pump, and not just 25 feet, let's say 100 feet away from the building? No. I'll do those things. I will deliver a bolus and then try to turn it off and be like, will it deliver that bolus? Well, no, because it's not on. But those are things I need to consider in order to develop good user tools to advise people. Like, don't give a bolus and walk away and turn your phone off. I need to be able to tell people not to do it. I need to know that it doesn't work if I do those things. So.
Have you all heard from patients who came up with some changes that you incorporated into the system?
Yes.
I mean, like during these trials, was there patient feedback? I'm curious what that might have been.
Yeah, so patients we all want the moon and the stars, right? So, I've got...
Good, push.
I've gotten some requests where I've been like, yes, in another universe, I could provide that to you. But I've also gotten some requests that I thought were interesting and applicable, like, for instance, the need for an extended bolus. Previous to us kind of at Type 0 revising this technology, there was no extended bolus option. Obviously, we're accommodating for high blood sugars and things like that after a meal with basal. But if you really blow it out of the water, an extended bolus might be necessary. Like, for instance, let's say you're going for a really great Mexican meal, and we know that's hard to bolus because the fat content, the carb content, perhaps even the protein content between beans or chicken or whatever you're eating, that's a complicated meal to bolus. And it doesn't start digesting all at one time. So you may choose to better inform the system by saying, hey, I would like maybe 40% of this now and 60% of this over 2 hours. We're still going to accommodate for what you can't do, which would be, increases response to increase in blood sugars in the meantime. Or we might reduce basal because it might have been too aggressive, or maybe you're eating more slowly. But, you can choose to better inform the system. And that was a reasonable request in my mind, particularly going as an insulin pump user to a closed loop system. What are some features I'm used to having, I'm used to using, that I don't want to lose? And that was one of them I thought was a really intelligent, reasonable request.
Have you done another trial since the big laptop one? I mean, a real clinical trial of an artificial pancreas system?
Yes, before joining the Center for Diabetes Technology in 2010, I continued to do trials after that. So I did, I'm trying to think how many trials I did. I know it was at least 8. It might have been 10.
Wow.
And they weren't all artificial pancreas. Some of them were, how to better inform the artificial pancreas. So, collecting data that could be used to better inform that. So I've done everything from, the hyper and hypoglycemic challenges in patients with a clamp, which is, you've got the IV inserted, they're administering the insulin, they're driving your blood sugar high on purpose with lots of carbs, they're driving your blood sugar low on purpose with lots of insulin to manage and monitor those counter-regulatory hormones. So I've done everything from closed loop to hospital bed research in order to contribute towards the development of this device.
Wow. Is it hard, not those studies, I'm sure those aren't hard to walk away from, but are the studies that have an artificial, I mean, that can't feel good.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Is it hard to walk away from the artificial pancreas ones? From what I've heard, people who've done things like that, it's just the mental burden is decreased to the point where it's hard to give it up.
No, absolutely. I wanted to stay in the hospital and I wanted to stay on the device. I wanted to take it home with me. And I've had patients, as a research coordinator doing those studies, I've had patients cry when they get the device back, and I understand it. I'm like, I get it. You had relief for a little while, you could sleep with peace of mind, and or your child could sleep with peace of mind. I've had parents cry giving their, the device back, but, and I assure them that everything they've done will go towards the advancement of this, and it's not all for naught, nothing was lost in your participation of the study. I get the emotional connection. I mean, this disease has a huge emotional burden, a huge mental burden when you think about, your son or myself, how often we're actually interacting with devices or making decisions that affect our health at all times. I mean, you kind of shut it off to go to sleep, but if that CGM alarm goes off, or you start getting sweaty and symptomatic from hypoglycemia, that sleep gets interrupted. So, all time that you get back is precious. I totally understand that.
Well, and we should say, I mean, you obviously know what you're talking about. You're type 1. You were diagnosed when you were in college, right? Mm-hmm. Can we talk about that? How were you, what was your story? Did you find out at school? Did you get very ill? Were you home?
I was at school as a junior at James Madison University, and I was 20 years old at the time. It was 1998, so everyone could do the math and see how old I am now. And I had been sick. I'd gotten progressively worse over the course of a year. So I had got a number of illnesses. I had walking pneumonia. I had full-blown pneumonia. I had I'd been pretty sick that year, and I just had come to a cluster of symptoms and I'd gone to a number of doctors who had been like, look, I'm peeing all the time. I'm thirsty. I'm eating 3,000 calories a day. I'm still losing weight. What is going on? I have leg cramps at night. These debilitating, what I was calling Charlie horses, which was actually, at the very end was some rhabdomyolysis, which is where you're, breaking down muscle tissue for fuel because you're no longer able to process the nutrients you're putting into your body. Wow. So, I'd gotten to the point where I was as close. It's a miracle that I made that and was diagnosed. When I was diagnosed and got the help that I needed, that I don't have severe complications, and that I didn't die. There's, wow. When you read the stories today of some people who have gone on long enough, and some kids who even have had kind of acute beta cell death and, have passed away or have had severe complications. I am so grateful to be standing here today and even able to tell my story, which is one of my motivating factors for wanting to get into this research and into the development of a product that would help, because, I was so sick. I remember I borrowed a dress for a formal early in the week. It was for I borrowed it and it fit on a Tuesday. And the event was on Sunday, and by then it was 2 sizes too big. And I know. And so I was rapidly losing weight. I'm not a skinny girl to begin with, but, at that point I was like, I'm even losing the parts of my body that I thought I couldn't lose. So, like things that I'd become attached to. And I realized, God, I just got to get help. And the precipitating event that drove us to going to the emergency room, my mother taking me to the emergency room, was I was drying my hair one morning, and I thought to myself, it's so hard. It's so hard to dry your hair. This is so hard. I don't know how I'm going to do this again. I bet I can't do this anymore. You should be able to stand up and dry your hair. And at that point I knew, don't stop, go, don't collect $200, please go to the emergency room. And, in hindsight, my parents should have known, my doctor should have known. But at that time, not a lot of people were being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 20. Now it's a common occurrence, which tells you how, one, better educated we are, but two, how much more common it is to be diagnosed with this disease.
And it's still missed. It's still missed quite a lot. Yes. I have a neighbor who has an adult daughter. She was about 20, maybe 21. Oh, that me or
That's
you?
me, and I'm fine. We're good.
Okay. Is that a Dexcom? What's going on?
Yeah, it wants me to enter some information, and I'll wait.
You're fine.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. So my neighbor has an adult daughter. I think she was 20 or 21 when she was diagnosed, and they kept thinking it was the stress of the end of the college school year. It was testing, and then she came home because she said, "Oh, I'm so tired. I don't feel well." And she came home, and her mother confronted her, thinking she was having an eating disorder.
Oh,
and that's how they started. And she had lost so much weight. Her parents had talked to her, but they hadn't seen her. And they did not think type 1 diabetes, even though, as you said, this is just a couple of years ago, it's more common. Actually, it's kind of a funny story because the only people they knew were us. Oh. And we didn't know each other all that well. They live around the corner.
Yeah.
So this beautiful 20-year-old college student comes to meet my then 4-year-old. And he's like, "It's going to be fine. Diabetes is fine." It was very funny.
That's awesome.
It's very funny. Yeah, and she became a terrific babysitter for us, as you can imagine.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And yeah, we've been very fortunate. But did you wind up coming home? Did you have to take a break from college?
I wanted to take a break from college, but my parents sort of have they're not military, but they sort of have a military mindset about life. Like chin up, you can do this. And I kind of needed that. At the time I was like, maybe I would just like take some time off and figure out, how do I count carbohydrates? Like, how do I figure this out? And, and to be honest, they were very supportive. They helped me prepare meals to take back to school with me. They labeled everything. I froze, I'd pull out little containers that said, 32 grams of carbs. We did a lot of preparation. And every weekend to do some more cooking, bring me some more food. And so I didn't do a lot of eating out or risky, guess the carb behavior for a while, which I just didn't feel the freedom to be able to do. And I kind of wish I had, but I didn't for a long time. And I played everything safe. I looked at all the labels. I counted all my carbs. Yeah.
I don't know why you're apologizing for that. I think that's fantastic. It's hard, though. It's hard, but, I can't fault you for that. I think we're all the same way in the beginning. You're terrified.
You are. You're terrified to do anything outside of the lines. And, I guess hindsight in the way that I've treated my own patients since then as a diabetes educator, I've given them more freedom and I've been more forgiving. Yeah. And I guess I wish I had the ability to do that for myself. And I've given them more forgiveness to be able to make mistakes.
Was there a time when that clicked for you, when you were able to make that transition? Because now, obviously you're helping other people. My assumption is that you're a little less tough on yourself.
Oh, I don't know if I am, but I try to be. And part of that is just my, type A personality, but, I've been able to move past that myself in treating other people and giving advice to other people because I see the humanity in this disease and other people, and I see the mistakes that can be made. And oh yes, you can go out for ice cream and count those carbs. I totally get that. Now, would I feel as comfortable doing that without a CGM? No. And to be honest, before I got a CGM in 2006 myself, and even that, let's be honest, we were doing random number generators at that time. They weren't that accurate. But before then, I was testing close to 30 times a day. So I was scared to not know what was going on. And I'm just really thrilled with the technology we have now, where I'm like, oh, you're 40 points off, and I get mad. And I start laughing, and I'm like, oh, well, remember when it was 100 points off? I do remember that. There were times when it was just not accurate at all.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But
No, that's fine. I'm just grateful for the technology we have today and the ability to make mistakes that we can do now safely.
Well, let's go back to that technology, to Type 0, and to the closed loop research, the AP system. I'm going to ask you the dreaded question I know you can't answer. What's your timeline?
That's not a dreaded question. I laugh because that is what everybody wants to know. And since when we've been able to enter a licensing agreement with Pump Company, because obviously you can have as many smart algorithms as you want, you actually need to be able to work with an insulin pump a continuous glucose monitor to do that. So now that we've entered the rat race with licensing everything to the what I basically have been joking is the final countdown to Tandem, they will be able to move at lightning speed. So a pivotal trial shouldn't be a year away, more than a year away. They should be able to move very quickly. So it's not 5 years from now. It's not 3 years from now. Could it be 2 years? Sure, it could be. I can't totally put my finger on what that date is because there are so many regulatory bodies that have to agree on things to get involved, whether it's over in Europe or it's here at the FDA. But I know that we're closer than we've ever been. And we're closer than almost anyone else. Now, are we closer than Medtronic that owns all the devices themselves? Probably not. But we're closer than anybody else at this point.
What will you do the first day you have this as a person with diabetes? What's that day going to look like?
I'm probably going to, do everything I want to do. I want to sleep in. I want to take my kid to anything he wants to do. Eat-wise, I want to be able that evening to eat pizza and beer. I want to kind of go hog wild for myself. So I want to have the freedom to do everything with my family that I wanted to do. Currently I would take my son out and I'm like still being kind of cautious and he gets to eat whatever he wants. No, he's only 2, but trust me, he eats whatever he wants. And I want to be able to do all of that. I want to sleep in. I want to not wake up in the middle of the night. I want to be a normal person.
I love this. I'm so excited for all of these projects, and I hope you all race to the finish and beat each other up and then all cross the line.
Trust me, we're all, we all want to get to the finish line at the same time, and I'm so thrilled that we are all trying to do that. I'm so thrilled as a person with diabetes that we are all fighting to get to the finish line because
that's great.
That's awesome. So yes, thank you. I'm so excited for that myself.
Molly, thanks for joining me. I think we'll leave it there. It was so much fun to talk with you, and please keep me posted on how this goes. I really appreciate it.
Oh, great. I'm so excited to talk to you, and thanks so much for having me.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacy Sims.
Much more information about Type 0 technologies, just go to diabetes-connections.com. And if Molly's voice sounded a little bit familiar to you, we did an episode a couple of weeks ago about keeping diabetes gear stuck to your skin, tips and tricks about how to get pump insets and CGMs to last in the hot, sweaty summer and in the water. And Molly was kind enough to tell us her technique. She talked about hot yoga. So if you haven't heard that episode, you could always go back to diabetes-connections.com. I have a search box in the upper right-hand corner. On mobile, it's actually right there on the front if you're looking at it on your cell phone. Just type in whatever the search term you're looking for, and the episode should pop right back up. You can use the word stuck or skin or gear. Whatever word really describes it best. And if it's in the description or in the title, the guest's name, it should pop right up. Okay, so from very high tech with the race for the closed loop to a little bit lower tech to the mechanics of finger sticks. When I heard about my next guest, when I met her, I looked at the product and I thought, genius. This is a genius idea. Diabetic Dabs, created by a mom of a child with type 1, of course. And this is a product that, I really, in all the years that we've been doing finger sticks, didn't think about the need. And then once I saw it, I thought, perfect. This makes a lot of sense. Diabetic Dabs are a disposable wipe. It's a tiny little, almost looks like a sticky pad of, those little yellow Post-it notes. It kind of looks like that, but they're disposable wipes. You stick them right in your meter case. And they're there to make it easy to give you something to wipe your finger on instead of your pants or your meter case or licking your finger after a blood glucose test. And then you throw them away. When I met the creator of Diabetic Dabs, Liz Sacco, at a conference, I really wanted to talk with her about this because that experience of wiping the blood or licking the blood or just being gross is something that I think a lot of us as parents have in common, kind of thinking like, well, how do we make that better? But the difference is Liz did something about it. Liz, thanks for talking to me. I'm excited to learn more about this.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll talk about the product and how the business is going in just a minute. But can you start by telling me what it was like when your son was diagnosed with type 1? How long ago was he diagnosed?
He was diagnosed in 2011, and it was March of 2011, so we are approaching the 5-year mark. Or excuse me, it was this coming March will be 6 years, so he was 9 years old. And hindsight is 20/20, and looking back now, there was a lot of red flags. I think that we were very fortunate because I remember thinking there was a window of a week where his thirst was off the charts and he was getting up to go to the bathroom multiple times in a given night. I didn't necessarily notice anything in his behavior from a standpoint of, I remember after being diagnosed, my girlfriend was like, it's funny because I did notice, he was a little bit more quiet or, not as participating in certain things, and I didn't see that aspect of it, but certainly the thirst and the frequent urination jumped out. So we went to the doctor, and yes, of course, you're blindsided. I think, mother's intuition, you almost know something's wrong, and when he was diagnosed, they sent us, certainly right down to the emergency room, and it was very overwhelming. I tell people it was like a whole different language.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I remember being like, oh, I don't know what a correction is. I don't know, as far as there's just, you're overwhelmed. And it was very frightening and challenging. But at the same token, I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is, I have to be his strength because how I react is how he's going to react. And I certainly want him to be, know that he's going to be able to handle this and we're going to get through this. So it was, and it does. Time helps. Time helps, and then all of a sudden you have these little successes with everyday challenge. However, it was a learning curve because there was nobody that was in my family, in my husband's family, or even in our circle of friends that had a child with diabetes. So it was very, very new to us.
Yeah, so when David was diagnosed, then were you able to reach out to anybody, or was it really just your healthcare providers?
It was really just our healthcare provider. I think we are blessed with an unbelievable community, and the more we kind of dug our heels in and the more proactive I got, you certainly have, a multitude of people and support and resources that you can reach out to. But the initial, right when he was diagnosed, there wasn't anybody close to me that I could reach out to and say, can you help me out in this?
How did he do adjusting? 9 years old is not quite preteen, but I'm sure it was pretty challenging for him. I mean, did he go back to school quickly?
He did. He was remarkable, and it was kind of at an age. I think of you a lot because I know that your son was only 2, and I certainly don't think there's any age that's a good age to be diagnosed. But at 9, he was old enough to kind of understand what was going on. So I think managing it from a day-to-day basis, he caught right on. He was tremendous. By the time we left the hospital, he actually was giving himself injections. And he was
great.
Yeah, so he really took charge of it and took it with control, and he was amazing. But yes, to have to watch is obviously, as you know, to watch anybody have to do what they do on a regular basis between the injections and pricking their fingers. It's certainly not a fun process, but he handled it with unbelievable resolve.
That's great to hear. So how did you come up with this idea for your product? Because most people, they prick their finger, you've got a little blood. My son just kind of wipes it on something. His friend licks his finger. Gross.
That's exactly. And I was one of those, adjusting your lifestyle, and he has now all these extra steps in his day. And I felt that I was always looking for something to wipe his finger on, right? So it was kind of like I was handing him, a tissue, which inevitably he would throw out. So I would try to put a package of tissues in his case itself, and that was so cumbersome. He's like, Mom, I'm not keeping it in it. So
kids love those little pocket packs. That's so cool for a 12-year-old to be walking around with a big puff of tissues.
Yeah, exactly. So of course, that's what he did. He resorted to wiping it on his clothes or the inside of his case, and it was just very, it was concerning to me. Well, not only was it gross, because if you opened up the inside of his case, it was, a pool of dry blood, and of course my laundry was covered in little blood spots. But outside of that, I thought to myself, this cannot be, a clean, safe way for him to be doing this. There's got to be an alternative solution, because it's a very simple solution, but sure enough, I found that there wasn't a product in the marketplace that served this need. And it was an opportunity for me to think, okay, well, I'm going to create this product because it's going to bring value to David. And then being, as I had alluded to earlier, once you're a member of this community, I think you become super passionate about diabetes and making a difference and helping. And I thought to myself, well, if I can develop this product and it's going to bring value to David, it'll bring value to everybody that's living with diabetes. And we do give a portion of the profits back to diabetes research.
That's great. So how did it go when you first started doing this? Because I'll be honest, when I first saw you, I saw you at a big conference, and we connected there. I kind of thought to myself, do we really need something extra like that? I mean, do you really need something like that? But I saw recently a post about this, and people love it. What was the reaction right out of the gate? Because I know you've been building for a while.
Yeah, so I've very positive, which, as a business owner / mother / trying to fill a need, I have a great response. And it's funny because, everybody says, oh my God, you're absolutely right. Whether they're living with diabetes or whether they have a child with diabetes or a parent with diabetes, they're like, oh yeah, they licked their finger, or oh yeah, they, like I have some girlfriends that are school nurses, and they're like, oh, they just wipe it on the desk. Like I see this all the time. So yes, it's been very fulfilling from the standpoint of we've had a very positive feedback to the product. And whereas our goal was to try to make it as convenient and efficient as possible, so it's not one more thing that you have to carry. So that's why we designed it that it would attach to the testing kit. So it's incorporated as part of the routine.
And I should jump in and give a better explanation, because it really does look like a small sticky, those yellow sticky notes, a small pad that fits right into a standard meter case. So it's not something extra, as you say. It's just kind of part of the case that most people carry around anyway.
Right. So what the goal is that if we can get it into the case when people are newly diagnosed, then those bad habits are prevented. If they're aware of the product as they're newly diagnosed and they just attach it to the case. So because, as far as the lancet and the meter itself, then it's right there. Right. For example, with my son, David, it's an automatic to him now. He just tears off the sheet, he tests his blood, and then he actually uses it to remove the bloody test strip as well. So it's incorporated as part of his routine now.
Wow, if you can get them to throw away the test strips, that's a bonus too. That's already fallen out.
That's very funny, because I can't tell you how many people say that. And I can also attest to it, because I have test strips, right? You have little trails of test strips everywhere. We need to invent now a little trash that can attach to the kit to put it in, right?
This is available online, and of course we'll link up more information at diabetes-connections.com. Are you in stores anywhere? Is that part of the plan?
We are. We just actually, Ingalls, which I believe is in your neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. It's the North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. They just brought it on. We're also available in Amerimark, which is an online catalog, and then it's the other e-commerce, eBay, Amazon, our website. But the goal is to get into more stores. Yes, we're in the process of several talks with various pharmacies. So we'll, hopefully within the next 6 months to a year, you'll be seeing it on more shelves.
That's pretty cool. When you look at this and you look back to the last really 5.5 years now, did you ever think you would do something like this? I mean, sitting in the hospital thinking, what the heck is a ketone or what's a correction?
That's right.
To this?
No, not at all. And people ask me that quite a lot. I worked prior to having children, and then I became a stay-at-home mom. I have 4 boys, and once David was born, who's my oldest, I became a stay-at-home mom, and I certainly was not anticipating starting my own business or developing a product, but I think sometimes life throws you opportunities, and sometimes they come in different arrays, and mine happened to be my son's diagnosis of diabetes.
I'm curious, is your product covered by any health insurance?
It's not at this point.
Is that something that you could submit to? I don't know how any of that works.
Well, again, that's a learning curve for us as well. We're certainly trying to go down that avenue because I think it would be very beneficial to have it covered. But at this point, it's a learning process. Yeah. It's not covered as of now.
And one funny thing to talk about is we both graduated from Syracuse. Love finding Syracuse people out there, but unlike me, you stayed up in the snowy Northeast.
I did, which, makes you question sometimes my judgment. But, although I do not think it's as bad as Syracuse from the standpoint of the winter. So, no, but we're still up in the Northeast. You got it.
It's hard to match that snow.
Yes, it is.
Did I miss anything you wanted to mention? No,
I'm just thrilled to, be part of your podcast. And, the biggest goal is just to get the Diabetic Dabs word out, spread the word. We want to try to get it in the hands of as many people as we can, and we want to make a difference by, donating to research, because I think all of our goal is to see a world free of type 1 diabetes.
And can I ask, and it's okay if you don't want to say exactly, where you are donating, when you say you're donating to research, where does that go?
Right. So we have donated, because there's so many fantastic organizations that are kind of all aimed at the same cause, we have used JDRF, the American Diabetes Association, are the two that we really kind of split our donations to. But we also have done some, like with the bionic pancreas, we've donated to some companies with the bionic pancreas. So we don't limit it to one particular organization.
Excellent. And I guess I want to know, how are your sons doing? How's David doing? As you said, he's the oldest of 4. How's everything going? It's got to be busy in your house.
It's a very busy. I like to call it a organized chaos. No, he's doing great. Thank you for asking. He's now wearing the pump. He actually just went into his freshman year of high school, so it's a new school for him. But he's managing the disease great, and he's living life like a typical freshman high school boy. He plays sports, so he's doing terrific. And the other 3 boys, same school has started, and everybody's back in a routine, so there's no complaints.
That's great. What kind of pump does he wear?
The Medtronic.
And did he start on that recently?
He actually went on the pump shortly thereafter his diagnosis, within 3 months.
Okay,
great. He was on the pump.
Great. Well, Liz, thank you so much for joining me, spending some time talking about this, and I hope I run into you again soon. That was fun.
That was fun. Thank you. And certainly I look forward to connecting again soon.
More information on Diabetic Dabs at diabetes-connections.com. We have so many innovators in this community. It's really cool to see. Really fun to talk to Liz and to get to know her a little bit better. So if you like what you hear, please do me a favor and tell somebody about it. That would be great. I'd really appreciate it if you could pass on the show. You can email the newsletter link, or you can just share it on Facebook. However you can get the word out to somebody that you think might benefit from hearing the information here on the podcast. Also, go ahead and make sure you're following us on social media, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Instagram is just me, Stacey Sims. I don't have 2 accounts on Instagram, but you can follow the show separately on Facebook and on Twitter. Always love to hear from you. Drop me a line, Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. Let me know what you'd like to hear, or if you're interested in being a guest. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. I know everybody's very busy, and the fact that you're taking an hour every week to listen to the show is something I really appreciate. Your time is valuable, and I'm very privileged that you're spending some of that with me. I'm Stacey Sims, and I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.